Hey, Carrie or Candace, my video is stopped, it says by the host.
Hey, counselor, you said the video is stopped.
Yeah, when I go to click, oh no, it just came on. We're all good.
Okay, perfect.
It was-
I have the screen share up now. Can you see it?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. I think Counselor Braden is the only counselor who has come in so far in addition to you.
Yeah, I think we'll end up starting a little late, but we're not gonna like postpone the start. I'll just send everybody a note and see
Okay.
it.
And I did make you a co-host, so you can just move the attendees over to panelists whenever you're ready.
Sounds good. Will
Okay.
do. Councilors Breeden and O'Malley, I'm giving our colleagues like 2 more minutes and then we'll just jump in.
2 minutes is all I need to try to wolf down this lunch. So with my luck, you may need to perform the Heimlich maneuver remotely.
Please no choking. Obviously, you know that me reading my intro remarks takes a while.
So. Perfect. Roger that. Bon appetit.
We don't want to hear a cough there, Liz. Okay. I think we're gonna get started, and it may be a brief working session with just the 3 of us, or we may be joined by some colleagues. Either way. All right. Are we all ready, Candace?
We are all ready to go, Counselor.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks so much. Okay. I'm calling this working session of the Boston City Council Ways and Means Committee to order. My name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also Chair of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm joined here today by my colleagues Councilor Liz Breeden from District 9 and Councilor Matt O'Malley from District 6. This working session is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv. It will be rebroadcast on Comcast Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Verizon Channel 1964. The Council's budget review process this year is comprised of a combination of public hearings and councilor working sessions. This is actually the last of those working sessions. So the working sessions are designed to be a chance for councilors to generate questions, and as such, they don't have a public comment period, but we strongly encourage residents to take a moment to engage in that process over the whole process by giving testimony for the record. So you can do that at our budget hearings, where you can go to the public notice. There's a link for a Zoom, and you can join us and testify at the end of those hearings. You can also come to one of our 2 remaining dedicated public testimony hearings, May 26th at 6 p.m. to testify about the BPS budget, or May 28th at 6 p.m. to testify on all other aspects of the city budget. You can also email the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov with your written testimony, or fill out the form on our website, which is boston.gov/council-FY21 budget. It's also a place to learn about the process, see the calendar, and you can submit a video to us as well, and we will attach video testimony to the hearing. You can also informally tweet us your questions using the hashtag BOSSBudget, BOS budget. And we look forward to your participation. It's definitely a really challenging time for the city and all of us. And so we still need to set a budget together, and that has to be a community-based process. So today's working session, is on docket 0588 to 0590, orders for the FY21 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations for the school department and for other post-employment benefits, OPEB. Docket 0591 to 0592, orders for capital fund transfer appropriations. Docket 0593 to 0596, orders for the capital budget, including loan orders and lease purchase agreements. Those are collectively the set of dockets that make up the mayor's proposed FY21 budget. And then also docket 0612, which is an order authorizing the city of Boston to enter into a memorandum of understanding with certain entities for the purpose of reporting costs and receiving Title IV-E, Every Student Succeeds Act, allowable federal reimbursement for said costs as they relate to transporting eligible children from foster placements and schools of origin. Our focus areas in today's working session will be the focus areas for the BPS hearings next week on Tuesday the 26th. So those will be BPS commitment number 5, which is to cultivate trust. Specifically, sort of subtopic areas are the administration, budget, and central office budget of the department, leaves of absence, workers' comp, retention challenges and policies, BPS transportation, school safety, food and nutrition services, and athletics. And then under BPS Commitment 6, activate partnerships, COVID-19 learning loss replacement, summer school 2020, partnerships, graduation and career readiness, credit recovery, age 22. And then, as I mentioned in the docket list, there's also an MOU with, it's an ESSA MOU related to the transportation of foster children. And we'll also be considering that. So those are the topics. Since I started, we've also been joined by Councillor Ed Flynn from District 2. So I want to thank my colleagues for joining. And as has been our practice, we will just jump right into questions on any of those topics. We'll start with Councillor Breeden, and then it'll be Councillor O'Malley, and then Councillor Flynn, and then I'll go. Councillor Breeden.
Thank you. I say I always introduce my discussion because I'm learning so much about the budget process, and I'm learning so much about the Boston School budget. So I'm here to learn more from my colleagues as well as yourself, Councillor Bach. The issue really, in terms of making up for COVID-related learning loss, my question is, do they have any metrics to measure COVID-related learning loss? And then what sort of remedial strategies will they have to make up for that? And that's really the top question I have on the top of my head right now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Breeden. Before we continue, I just wanted, for central staff, I think there's an issue the other councillors are having where they can't initiate video right now. I was wondering if we could fix that. I know I had it at the start. So we'll just pause here briefly whilst we wait on that. So I want to be able to see all of you. Otherwise, it's just me talking into the void. Well, we're waiting for other folks to be visible. I guess I'll take out of order just one of my questions, which really is, well, first of all, welcome to Council President Janey, who has joined us. Madam President, we are hanging tight for 1 second while the central staff works on making people able to share their videos.
Hey, Counselor, you should be able to see them now.
Okay, great.
Oh, there we go.
There he is. There's Councillor O'Malley. Excellent. Ah, wonderful. Let's see. It doesn't feel so lonely anymore. All right, great. Now that I can see my colleagues, we will jump to Councillor Matt O'Malley from District 6, and then it'll be Councillor Flynn and then Councillor Janey. Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought that was Flynn's doing because he often says I have a face for radio, so I thought he was the culprit. But thank you, Candace, for letting us through, and thank you for hosting this right after our council meeting. A couple of questions as I'm going through the budget book. The first is as we talk about sort of retention and graduation. I think I had asked this at earlier, perhaps the high school or secondary school budget hearing, but it bears repeating here. Just the fact that the graduation rate has dipped by 2 percentage points, which is significant, and want to see what the 2018 actual graduation rate was 75.1. The 2019 graduation rate was 73.2. We had celebrated that 75% rate, rightfully so. So to see it drop by 2 percentage points is very, very concerning. And it's particularly concerning given the fact that that number will, I would assume, hopefully not, but likely rise during this school year, just because we've perhaps lost touch of with some students. Having said that, the dropout rate has actually gotten better. It's decreased by 1.2 percentage. So I want to put the good with the bad. It's great. The dropout rate has decreased, but it's a little it is troubling that the graduation rate has also decreased. As it relates to transportation, obviously this is a huge issue that we talk about quite a bit during budget season and otherwise. I've asked this at a couple of budget hearings thus far, and it's always relegated to, we'll talk about this at the transportation meeting. So certainly the strategy, the transportation budget grows. We provide transportation to fewer kids every year, and yet the budget continues to grow. Fuel costs were down. That's often cited as a motivating factor of why we've spent more. Fuel costs are actually down. I want to continue to push for every opportunity to move to an electrified fleet of vehicles, where we are with that, recognizing that school buses may have certain challenges. I also want to talk specifically about transportation and how it relates to some of the contingency plans that may have to be deployed in the new school year, what we're talking about in terms of transporting kids to and from school. And out of district transportation, this is a huge figure that we spend every year, and we often have students who we pay very, very high tuition rates for out of district placement, to secure that those children or those students spots there. On top of that, we are paying a huge transportation rate where you've got one student sometimes being driven to the North Shore or beyond at a very, very high rate. It is troubling for two reasons. One is it's a real budget buster, but even more troubling is the fact that we need to be able to offer services for all these students. There should be no challenge that a student has that we as a system are not able to handle, and we're not able to provide services for that. It's the right thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. It is also, in many, many, many cases, if not most cases, the most cost-effective thing to do. Transportation, summer school, what exactly that's going to look like for this summer. The food and nutrition is always a really interesting part. We've actually, the My Way cafes are terrific. We want to see those expanded. We want to make sure that we can provide kids with healthful food options. And I know that this is something that this superintendent feels very strongly about, as do I. So look forward to discussion on school, just changes to our school nutrition, what we're able to do. It is worth repeating and noting the good work that has been done, delivering meals to students and their families. So I want to acknowledge that as well. And also see if that has affected our school budget. My guess is probably not, but I want to check into that as well. And I think that is all. Central office, what we're looking at, I think I saw there was 1 or 2 additional employees, what those roles are. Salary information of central office individuals, making sure that they reflect the vibrancy and diversity of the city. I know is important to all of us. BPS is usually pretty good in that regard, but just getting more information on central office. Obviously, I think to a person, we all want to make sure that all the as many resources and as much funding as humanly possible goes directly to the schools and less to central office. But obviously, there's a role that the individuals, the hardworking men and women of BPS central office play. So we want a little more clarity on that as well. And that is all I have for this round. Thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Councillor O'Malley. All right, I want to note that we've also been joined by Councillor Mejia and Councillor Asabi George. And next up will be Councillor Flynn, and then it'll be Councillor Janey. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Councillor Block, and also want to say thank you to the central staff for their work behind the scenes as well. Just going for the topics that we're here to discuss. As it relates to transportation, wanted to ask about the logistics and any issues on transportation as it relates to transporting students with special needs, and to get an update on how that process is going and what challenges it presents. Also, as it relates to the upcoming school year and transportation, what the plan is if we do have a bad winter with the snow, and transporting students with special needs as well. Just want to think outside the box and get an update on what they're thinking on those issues as well. School safety, always an important issue. I wanted to try to get some information on school safety and public health, a combination of the two, in terms of, with the coronavirus, what are the unique challenges on safety and health as it relates to parents coming into the school or visitors coming into the school, what the process is, and how can we make sure that our schools are as safe and are always as healthy as we possibly can be for our students and our staff and teachers as well. Food, just want to get an update on the nutritional programs that the schools are offering. I think the school department did a great job on food access. I'd like us to expand that program, especially in the summertime when students really need food access, especially including our students in public housing developments. Can you hear me, Council Bar? Yeah, okay.
Yep, hear you great.
Okay, yeah, I just want to see about the food access program and making sure that our students in public housing also get the nutritional support that they need and deserve as well. Partnerships, want to see what the unique partnerships we have with some of these major businesses in Boston that these companies are doing so well. I'd like to learn more about the partnerships that we have with the schools and getting our graduates or getting our students prepared so that they can get into those good paying jobs as well, that they have the necessary training to get those jobs. I want to learn more about the outreach that these companies are doing to our students, and many of them are getting tax breaks as well. So, you know, if you get a nice tax break, you know, you really need to work extra hard to make outreach to our students in the Boston Public Schools, in my opinion. And finally, just I'd like to know more about the central staff, the language access programs that they have, or that they're recruiting senior staff that can speak many languages. Are we recruiting persons of communities of color into many of the high-ranking positions at the public school system? What is the outreach on that regard? And are we also giving a pathway to a lot of our public school graduates, who attend some of these Boston universities? Are we also giving them a pathway to get some of these jobs in the public schools and as teachers as well? Thank you, Council Bach, and thank you for all the work you're doing on this issue.
Thank you so much, Councillor Flynn. All right, next up is Council President Janey, and then it'll be Councillor Mejia, and then Councillor Asabi George. Councillor Janey.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you great.
Okay, so we can just get in, no special orders and topics and all that stuff. I will just go in order of questions. I think I'm seeing a 39% decrease for the Office of the Chief of Equity and Strategy, so just would want to understand that. Questions around workman's comp claims. And I'm interested in understanding how much money we've spent on transportation during the shutdown, given that these buses were used to deliver food. So want to know how much we spent compared to, what we spent years past, to see if there's any savings. That would have been a good question for our post-audit hearing yesterday. But I'm interested in that, and looking forward to FY21. I'm really interested in how we will get kids to school when school buildings reopen. And so what is the plan? What are we thinking about in terms of kids who rely on school buses or even on the MBTA bus? Now with school buses, we have a little bit more control, and I just want to know what the plan is. I would anticipate, just like many people might be scared to go back on the T, that might be the case with school buses. So whatever the safety protocols are. And then if there was some sort of savings, just comparing, the last few months since March 17th, compared to last year, I'm wondering where that money is. Are we trying to redirect that money? Because I don't think we spent the same amount trying to deliver food to folks as we do when it's children on the buses. Then I think in February, a consultant was being hired for on-time performance and safety, and there was a report. I think I want to update on where things are with this. I think this came out in one of the hearings.
Yeah, the transportation hearing, they reported that the consultant was working on the study, I think, related to on-time performance. But I don't think it wasn't done. We didn't see it.
Okay, all right. So if we could get in either in an update or kind of what the timeline would be, that would be great. Let me see. Oh, obviously the spending question. That will continue to be a question for mine going throughout the hearings, trying to understand, what was spent and what the plans are for FY21 moving forward to improve upon that. BPS is one of the big major 4 spenders, and there's a lot of room for growth with BPS. So I would certainly want to understand how much of the money projected out for FY21 is being spent with MBEs, WBEs, and with local businesses. I'd like to know the number of contracts, the types of contracts, the amount of money, where they're located, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of questions on summer learning, and I know this keeps coming up, I think, in most of our hearings, but I just would like, to continue to beat that drum that clearly there's got to be something. Who knows if we'll have school buildings open, but what children are missing out on over the last few weeks clearly doesn't compare to what they would have been getting if they were in school buildings. So how we are going to make up for that. I'm worried that we're going to have 2 summers of slippage. We have our actual summer, and then we had the spring right before. And so just getting a sense of, what the plans are for summertime learning opportunities. Other questions on BPS transportation. I have lots of questions around demand. I want to see like choice data, demand data, so we can understand where the demand is. I'd like to understand capacity on the buses, like how many kids prior and what they're projecting out for. I know we don't have our enrollment quite yet actually we do. We should be able to. I mean, it's not going to be firm until, the October, but I'd like to just lots of questions on what we're doing with transportation. Obviously, door to door is a big issue. I'd want to understand where we are in looking at any of the IEPs. I don't know if like I know these are decisions that happen in IEP meetings. My grandson has an IEP, but whether they're really looking at which students are ready to take that leap and get their Charlie cards or not. I'd be interested in looking at the door-to-door. Also with transportation, if we're talking about transportation, clearly the out-of-district placement for transportation on that as well, what the costs are and what the plans are to try to contain some of that. That is where a big chunk, most of our money, I know lots of counselors talk about the transportation money and how much money we're spending on transportation. Very little of that money, less and less and less of that money is for actual choice dollars. So we've got the home-based plan, limiting choice. We've got middle school students out on the MBTA, but the costs that continue to go up are these other costs. And so the more we can offer BPS students what they need in BPS schools to cut down on some of that out-of-district placement, the better. Obviously, first and foremost, we always have to make sure that kids are getting exactly what they need as it's identified in their IEP and that their needs are being met. But we also have to be responsible in making sure that we're updating and checking in and seeing where we can cut on some of the costs while still making sure families get and children get what they need. Is this assignment too, or is this just transportation? No.
Assignment was more the one we did on
or the day before. Like we just did something on assignment, I think. On school safety, I have questions like on, I don't know if this is a place where we'd get any updates on the code of conduct or not, but certainly I'd like a breakdown of how many school buildings have school police officers. I'm kind of interested in that issue there. Food nutrition. I know there's the goal of expanding My Way Cafe. I'd like a breakdown of which schools have it, which schools don't, have that breakdown by either neighborhood or city council district. And for schools that don't have it and that are still relying on box lunches, who are those providers? How do we make sure that that is local, that it is fresh? I know I have City Fresh Foods is in my district and has struggled to get contracts from BPS. The contracts are always so big. So as more and more doing the cooking on site, I think there's an opportunity here for those that are still relying on the box lunches. So I just like to understand where all of that is. Athletics, plans moving forward, given, what we're going through, I'd be interested in which athletics do we think we can pull off without changing too much. I don't know, maybe like track or something, I don't know. In which we have to either postpone or really adjust. And if there are adjustments that have to be made, like how much of those adjustments require some sort of financial investment that's going to impact this FY21 budget. I think that's good for now. If I have any more, I can certainly save it for another. Oh, wait a minute. I'm seeing a whole nother section here. Let me just double check. How am I doing on time, Madam Chair?
I
don't have to use it all up. That's why I'm trying to be mindful. If we all use it up all the time, then
exactly
get this thing. It's enough that I should just wait for another round. So I'm happy to do that, Madam Chair. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Councillor Janey. Councillor Mejia is up next, and then it'll be Councillor Asabi George. Councillor Mejia.
Hi, yes, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. So for round one, I am just it's commitment 5 and Cultivate Trust. I'm intrigued by the admin and budget in central office. We're seeing some cuts to the administration budgets for central administrators, as well as middle and elementary school administrators. What is the reason for those cuts? Curious in terms of retention, how are we specifically going to about hiring and maintaining teachers of color and other teachers to reflect their student body? I keep saying that one thing is to get us in the door, but the other is to keep us. And so I'm really curious about what that retention situation is looking like. In regards to BPS transportation, I'd like to get a little bit more information on one-on-one bus monitors, how many are employed by the school district, and what percentage of our bus monitor budget goes to those one-on-one monitors. I know this is really important because there are a lot of families who have students who are on IEPs, and that that monitoring situation is important, and we need them. So just curious on what that looks like. School safety, I would like to hear from BPS regarding their relationship with BRIC and what their supposed guidelines are for sharing information. You know, we filed our safe sanctuary hearing, which we have yet to do, but I'm still real interested in hearing about that sharing of information. In March, the superintendent's office released a draft of a new policy around information sharing, and I'd like for them to come prepared to speak on that new policy. What kinds of community involvement went into making that policy? Curious about bias training, if it's a part of that policy. And then in food and nutrition services, what are we doing to make sure that the food our students eat is actually local, not packaged in another state and shipped back to Boston? I'm also curious about the role that we can play in supporting smaller businesses in the area to help feed our children. How can we utilize a network of small businesses, particularly restaurants that serve culturally competent foods, to provide meals? And besides vegetarian options, how are specific dietary needs being accommodated in our schools? And then I have some more questions for round two, but given that Kenzie's looking all bored, I think I'll end with that.
I'm not at all bored. You gotta let me sit back some of the time. All right, Councillor Asabi George, you're up next.
Let me unmute you, and then let me get to my notes. So questions that I have for these, I think it's questions 5 and 6, or whatever it is, the 5 and 6. So I have some questions around the age 22 policy. I'm curious how many 21-year-olds do we have in BPS that still have, that will hit age 22 before the end of a natural school year or graduation, and how are we supporting students that are transitioning out of BPS in that sort of that older age category. I also have questions around, around BPS athletics, and appreciate the question by Councillor Janey around what are the athletics that can be played. But I am also looking at sort of an evaluation of the BPS athletics department. Is there a need for additional coaches? Is there a need for assistant coaches, especially in some of our schools that particular sports may be more popular? So there's a lot more kids coming out, or there's a need to add a JV or a freshman program perhaps. And then in our lower grades, adding some programming to support athletics at the high school, especially as we move from this K-6 to a K-6, 7 to 12, K-8, 9 to 12 model. And then also have a concern around athletic trainers. My boys play a lot of hockey, and that's a sport that there's usually an EMT on site. But I think across most of our athletic programming, I'd really say as a parent, all of our athletic programming, we should have trainers accessible just to be there in case of, certainly in case of injury, but making sure that kids are doing the things that they need to be smarter athletes. I think that athletics for our kids in Boston is a tremendous opportunity, and as much skill building and training and coaching, and I say like coaching in air quotes because I think we really need to develop athletes. That's something I'd like to invest in. And as a former high school teacher and a former high school coach, I think that athletics are a real opportunity to engage kids in a different way in school, and they perform academically much stronger. And I think there's a very direct correlation, and we've talked about this at previous hearings, between athletic participation, sports participation, and attendance in school. So I'm also thinking about this transition to 7 to 12 and 9 to 12 schools, and sort of redeveloping or restructuring our high schools, that we should really be supporting some serious athletic programming in that field. I've hit a time, so I'll wait for another loop for the rest of my questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Councillor Sabi George. I'll raise a few questions now. Certainly on the admin budget and central office, I would love to just dig into that a little bit in terms of, I think central office in any large organization is a space that can always just kind of grow. And so interested in how we benchmark ourselves against other school districts, large school districts, in terms of the proportion of our salary and jobs that are in a central office context versus in a school's context. And also interested in how it does seem like, we're moving more of our school-based supports into central office funding as part of the world of protecting certain things and making sure that we don't lose, critical things like nurses, et cetera, in our schools. But as a result, I would like a little bit more clarity on sort of which pieces of the central office costs are real central office costs versus which are out at the school site. And just in terms of proportionately, if we could break that down a bit. And I think thinking about in terms of those things that might be priced at the central office level, but going out to our schools, how we involve our teachers and administrators from the schools in partnership when we're thinking about whether it's new curricular programs, other things. I just think, often, obviously, we have somebody who's running point at the bowling building, and sometimes that can get away from a more robust conversation with a bunch of stakeholders at how it would best be rolled out. So I'm interested in how central office thinks about its role there and staff's its role there. Leaves of absence and workers' comp topic. I did see it looked like there was a significant increase in FMLA this year, and it seemed like perhaps that might have been just in the third quarter and related to COVID-19, but just would love to understand where the district is, whether that's been a big impact of COVID-19 and how they're thinking about that. Share the concerns about retention, and especially retention of teachers of color. There's you can have all the recruiting efforts you like, but as Councillor Mejia says, if you're losing people out the other door, then you don't get anywhere. Share everyone's concern about transportation. One thing we've definitely heard in my office is a concern, a bunch of parents who do have one-to-one bus monitors finding themselves frequently in a situation where they're called to come pick up their student because the bus monitor is out that day. This tends to happen particularly on Mondays and Fridays. I know we have a hard time retaining our bus monitors because they're not super lucrative positions. And I just really think, obviously, the students who have that support have it because of their IEPs, and their families are counting on it. So just want to dig into that and how we secure more reliability on the bus monitor front. School safety. I think, definitely concerned about how we're thinking about reorganizing our schools vis-a-vis public health this fall. And we started having those conversations in the capital budget hearing on Tuesday, but it would be good to sort of continue them. Agree on food. What I just want to understand on food is sort of what's the district's path forward, because I think Councillor Mejia has made reference a number of times. It's quite a large contract with Revolution Foods right now, which I don't have my notes in front of me about exactly when that lapses. But sort of, it seems like simultaneous to having that contract, we then added a bunch of expense in terms of My Way Cafe in order to give our students access to fresh food, which is great. And then we now also have this question of how we could use our BPS and other institutional food budgets in the city to support the economic recovery. So just would love to hear strategically how they're thinking about that. And I did ask a bit already at Tuesday's hearing about athletics, but to me, there's a real opportunity here we're making lemonade of like having to figure out more individualized athletic activities that students can do for the year ahead. And how do we do that in a way that's sort of scalable and supports our schools that don't have great gym facilities? So those are my questions. And I similarly will I have a bunch more that I'll save for a second round in deference to colleagues. So with that, we'll go back up to the top for a second round of questions. Councillor Breeden, you have the floor, and then it'll be Councillor O'Malley. Councillor Breeden.
Physical therapists who worked in schools. I'm curious about the related service providers. I think they come under central staff, central office expense. How many OTs, PTs, and speech pathologists are on staff, and what sort of budget does that eat up? I had a question. I echo some of your concerns around one-to-one monitors on transportation, and what proportion of the transportation budget is taken up with being either in a one-to-one monitor, or is there a nurse to go with them on transportation? That's that. And then back to athletics. I think it's wonderful that that able to avail themselves of participation in competitive sports at school. My concern is that we need to really have a robust physical education curriculum, so that students who not necessarily tend to go towards competitive sports, as much as that would be desirable. But to develop a culture in the school population or student population that would enjoy and be exposed to a range of physical activities that would suit their preferences, so that they would develop a lifelong habit of physical exercise, which would be very conducive to long-term health and wellness. So participation in sports. So, offering a curriculum of dance and yoga and other physical education curriculum that would have long-term impacts on the health and wellness of our population, especially since in this COVID crisis, we're seeing all these inequities and how vulnerable some populations are in terms of susceptibility to COVID, because they have because folks have a pre-existing condition such as diabetes. I think having a really robust physical education program in all of our schools would go a long way to addressing that. I had a question about partnerships in terms of who are our partners, nonprofit partners, business partners, college student and university and college partnerships. Do they bring something to the table, or do we pay for it? There was a partnership recently, I can't remember the program, but it was one that I assumed that BC was providing for our local school. But then I heard that they get paid out of the school budget to do it. So I'm wondering what that relationship looks like. And I need to get more details about the actual name of that program. It just has gone off the top of my head right now. But I really am a strong advocate for a strong physical education program. And I also, as a student, as a school athlete, high school athlete, I played field hockey in high school and went the whole way through. And I was still playing field hockey when I was almost 40. So that lifelong habit of playing in a competitive sport does a lot to develop character and discipline in our students. So having a strong athletics program is important too. But I really do feel that we can't that it's something, physical education is important for all our students. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Councillor Breeden. Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Braid, no doubt field hockey was a great primer for politics, and one of the reasons why you do so well at both. A couple of line item specific questions. Obviously, we're looking at about an $80 million increase, and the vast majority of that comes in personnel services, specifically just under $55 million for permanent employees. So obviously, so this is the central office sort of exact breakdown of what those positions are classified. I know we've got some social workers, we've got some additional teaching facility, just want sort of a general breakdown there. The health insurance, obviously, with that is up about $10 million. And then overtime seems to be about a $7 million increase. So I want a little more specificity on that, what that means exactly. As it relates to contractual services, utilities are up significantly, about $2 million. And that's doesn't really seem to be indicative of what we've seen in some other departments. So I'm curious about that. Contracted services are up $8 million, and transportation of persons is up $3 million. So it's now 106. And obviously, I'm just curious that I already brought that up at the earlier comments, what that means in terms of out of district placement, which is a surprisingly significant percentage of that. Going down to line item 53800, which is educational supplies and materials. We've seen a big jump from $6 million to $9.5 million. So what, more specificity on that. And then food supplies are down nearly $1 million. It's just, I'm surprised what exactly that means, how food supplies is different from food. Is that utensils and materials needed to prepare and serve food? The reserve account has seen a big decrease of about $17.8 million, and that's I'm sure has something to do with some of the collective bargaining. So I want a status on that. And then the lease purchase is up big time, about $4 million. Under equipment, of the $4 million, the total equipment increase of $4,036,818. $4,031,744 comes from lease purchase of equipment. Again, this isn't this doesn't jive with what we've seen from other departments, and that could very well mean that they're on a different schedule as it relates to leasing vehicles. But I want to know why that figure is so high, and I also want to know what the percentage of electric vehicles of the BPS fleet is, specifically central office. I believe they're the only individuals who would get a mandated or a city offered car. That's pretty much it. I stepped out for a moment, so I don't know if any of my colleagues had talked about the excess pool. That's obviously a big topic during the central office meeting, what that looks like, how many teachers are assigned to that, how we've been able to sort of redeploy their talents to better serve the children of Boston. So that is all I have for this working session. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor O'Malley. And no one had brought up the excess pool yet, so thank you for that. All right, next up, we're going to, one second, I'm just checking if I think Councillor Flynn maybe has had to go. So we will go straight to Councillor Janey and then Councillor Mejia. Councillor Janey. Madam Council President, you there? I'm going to skip her for now. Councillor Mejia, you ready with your second set of questions? All right, now I'm getting worried that people can't hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right, so we're going to jump to Councillor Asabi George then. Councillor Asabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to just echo, I think, Councillor O'Malley's comments around the electrification of our vehicles, our city-owned vehicles and leased vehicles. And I think I sort of tuned out, if I'm going to be honest, for a minute, and just want to make sure that I just want to double down on Councillor O'Malley's comments around electrifying, or at least looking to electrify our school bus fleet. I think that that's really important. Something that's important to me is the assessment that we were in the midst of regarding transportation, and we had a consultant and an MOU. We had a consultant reviewing some of our transportation work, and looking at how we're running that department, and we are constantly experiencing overruns. It's a hearing that I've had every year, a mid-year report, and we're always millions of dollars over in our transportation budget. I think this year with COVID-19, I am curious as to the impacts that will have on our budget, and if it will give us a surplus of any sort, but just curious about spending in the transportation piece, projected overruns this year, or any savings due to the abbreviated school year, and what we're planning on for next year. Around food and nutrition, I'm not sure if anyone asked this question, but are there any plans to expand Summer Eats program, as well as delivery services to families in high need? I think at one of our hearings, Councilor Edwards may have asked a question related to that. And then school safety, something that school safety covers a wide spectrum of ideas. We certainly think about any sort of larger scale violence in our schools, or what is commonly referred to as an active shooter event at one of our schools. It's important to me that we're making sure during any renovations or rebuilds or redesign of our schools that we are looking at making the design elements more secure, that we're creating safe entrances for guests to be welcomed into school buildings with appropriate sign-in procedures, that sort of stuff. But also the coming to and from school is really important when we think about safety, both safe routes in a sort of branded way, but also making sure that kids are walking to and from school, or being transported to and from school in a safe way, whether on bus or on foot, or by personal transportation. It's also important around the needle disposal around our schools, that we've got regular custodial sweeps and other adults taking a look at the environment and making sure that those environments are safe. And then all of this impacts the mental health of our kids, and making sure that mental health resources are available, create a safer school environment. So that's important to me. And just in general, when school reopens, hopefully in September, that the protocols that are in place are also mindful of creating a safe environment for our kids. I think that is it for me. I'll take one more look, and if there is more, I will ask it in one more round, but I think that may be it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilor Sabi George. I understand both folks we skipped are back. So I'll go Council President Janey, and then it'll be Councilor Mejia. Councilor Janey?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you so much. I apologize. I had to take a call and I had the volume down too low, so I did not hear you if you were calling me earlier. I wanted to come back to some of the items. When I saw retention, I was thinking student retention, but if we're talking about the workforce, I would certainly chime in and echo what you said, Chair Bach, and what Councilor Mejia said in terms of, part of our teacher diversity issue is about we're losing teachers of color faster than we're bringing them in the front door. That's been the challenge for a number of years. So I support that. But as it relates to student retention, I would, if that's the case, I would ask for some data, a breakdown of who's being retained, a breakdown by race and by language and by program areas. So if there are any students with disabilities, to see that there, and what plans we have for supporting students, because we know from many reports that have come out that it's important for students to learn with their peers and continue to move on with their peers. Obviously, we don't want them to move on with gaps, but if there's a way to recover that in the summer, or through a credit recovery, or some sort of extra tutorial program, I think we have to look at that, because of the connection between students who are retained, particularly if they're retained more than once, in the dropout rate. So I'd like some data on just what those numbers look like in terms of student demographics. On the school safety, like I'd be interested overall, like just what we're going to do with the numbers. If the goal, and I'm sure lots of folks have said this, but if the goal is to do physical distancing when we are back together, it suggests perhaps smaller groups getting together and maybe needing additional space or additional staff to be with young people. I think, I don't know if it was you, Chair Bach, but on the nutrition, where we are in the contract with Revolution, because to my point, I think there's an opportunity with smaller vendors like City Fresh and maybe some others that are local, that are fresh. And so if we're on that final year, I'd like to understand that. And if so, what are the plans for a new RFP? With partnerships, if these are external BPS partnerships, my memory is that there was an effort underway some years ago to do an analysis of what the needs were in certain schools and what the partners were offering and whether that was a good match and whether it was kind of effective and what was happening. I'm not sure if that's given some of the changes. I'm not sure if that is still the case, but if that's the case, I'd be interested in an update or report on that and how, if there are any external partners who have really stepped up financially to support our schools, I'd be interested in that. And certainly I think all would be very grateful for that kind of support. But I imagine many of our external partners, they too are facing many of the challenges that everyone else is facing. And so if there are, if they are facing so many challenges that they can't do what they used to do, I'd, just be interested in where we are on those partnerships. And then with graduation, I always would like to hear, and I don't know if this has been asked, but a breakdown of where we are in terms of graduation rates and where we are in terms of dropout rates, a breakdown demographically by race, by language, and by ability. And then similar questions, I think it was Councilor Asabi George around age 22. I think it was last year that there was a lot of advocacy for students who were falling through this crack. And it seems like such a simple fix. And we should not be allowing, some technicality of when your birthday falls, meaning we're giving students the boot, when for many of the students that we were talking about last year, this was like home to them. You were literally, it was like you were kicking them out of their house. And days till graduation, it was cruel. So I want to affirm what Councilor Asabi George, what I think I was hearing you say. I'm not, like I said, I was on a call, so I was a little distracted, but I want to affirm that if that's where you were going. And I think we as a body, we should figure out what we're going to do about that, whether that's a state fix, at the state level, or something that we can do here, or lobbying the school committee, whatever it is, because that was just really ridiculous. And so I'd like to see where we are in terms of who's in the programs and who, again, a breakdown by race and how successful we are. And then continue to invest if this is something that we think makes sense and we can't be kicking folks out. So that is it, I think, for me on these issues. I appreciate Madam Chair. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Madam President, for all those good questions. All right, next up is Councilor Mejia.
Okay, so can you hear me? Can you see me?
Can hear you and see you great.
So this is about partnerships, and sorry that I got skipped over. That was my mistake. I wasn't able to hear you. COVID-19 learning loss replacement. I'm just curious about what opportunities are, let me put on my glasses. What opportunities are there currently for students to provide feedback on their remote learning experiences? I know we rely a lot on surveys, but I'm just curious as to whether or not there have been some focus groups, a very strategic, maybe phone calls to students that doesn't rely on filling out a form. I'm wondering how we're reaching out to educators and parents to get their thoughts on how remote learning has been working or not for them. I think that, a lot of the energy has been focused on students and parents, but I also think hearing from our educators is just as equally as important. So would love to know what, if any, infrastructure has been built for that type of feedback. And summer school 2020, I'd love to know what that is going to look like, and wondering if there are any opportunities for multilingual summer education in BPS, specifically given the amount of learning loss that we will see this summer and this school year. I'm really particularly interested in our ELs and wondering what infrastructure is being produced to support the learning loss for this population. And then in regards to graduation and career readiness, I'm interested in more than just career readiness. I would like to know what plans are in place for life readiness. How are we handling life skills in our schools, and what resources are needed to make them a reality? I have a problem with what people call soft skills. I think these soft skills are far more, or even just as equally as important as the technical aspects of career explorations. I know that my soft skills are the ones that have brought me as far as I have gotten, and it's not my technical or command of certain things, but it's my ability to adapt and my ability to just understand just life in general. I think life skills and soft skills are incredibly important. And so just curious what we're doing on that front. And then lastly, just when I think about summer school and career readiness, I'm really looking to hear what type of partnerships our schools and the city is doing to bridge. It's not just about summer employment. I'm looking for year-long opportunities, paid internships, not just come in and learn, but that we are creating opportunities for young people to actually be paid for these learning experiences throughout the school year. I know that there are some programs that exist, but I'm just wondering how we can scale those programs so that more young people are able to work and learn and get paid for it during the school year as well. And that's it. Thank you, Chairwoman Bach.
Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Mejia. All right, I will ask a few questions. And then I'll just say, we're not gonna do a third round unless people raise their blue hands, but I'm happy to take for any further questions that come to people's minds. So one question I have, I really do want to dig in on the transportation contract. And again, kind of what the vision there is, because my understanding is that we signed a multi-year contract and then we're maybe in the second or third of 4 or 5 years of extensions. Second, Councillor Asabi George informs me, second of a series of 1-year extensions. And so I think there's a real question of what a real new transportation contract would look like that would be good for the district, and how we get to this place of RFPing for a new multi-year contract that achieves savings, because we spend, for anyone watching at home who doesn't already know, we spend 10% of the BPS budget on transportation. And some of that is absolutely necessary. Things like the bus monitors that Councillor Breeden and I were just talking about cost money. And certainly there's lots of our students who need to get across the city. But it's also it's a really large amount of our budget and takes from other things. And contracting is one of the ways to help drive that down. So I'm interested in that question. I really want to talk about our summer school. I think, it has come up in every hearing the council president referred to that, but this is the hearing we had designated towards the end of the budget process in order to talk about it with the maximum amount of information. But I think we really need to talk about it, and both in terms of resources, because to me, it seems like we need a much more extensive summer school program in terms of making it available to all students than we would traditionally have had. Obviously, also it has to be a lot more virtual than we would want to have traditionally wanted it to be. So want to know how they're thinking about that and what the cost implications of that are. And I have said this a couple of times, but for me, what's really important is we had some students who were already behind, right? We had students who were in trouble before COVID. And to me, the only silver lining that I can see in this whole situation is if we say, hey, we're going to throw like a moonshot kind of focus at addressing learning loss in this gap. And we just sweep those students who are already behind right up with everybody else. And it's not about, you're stigmatized. It's just like, we have a problem that we're solving as a district for everybody. Right. And so I really think we have to do that. Otherwise, I mean, we talk about making like a little bit of progress on the opportunity and achievement gap every year. And I mean, just COVID learning loss alone could set us back 5 years, 10 years. I mean, it's just the magnitude of the challenge is enormous. So really want to know what we're going to do. I know that we're still in this moment and that what we can do this summer physically is impacted by the public health situation, but we have to just be throwing the kitchen sink at it. So really want us to talk about that. I think on partnerships, a few people have mentioned this, but there's a real unevenness in partnerships. And one of the things I've seen is there's some amazing partnerships around BPS that I think often get kind of started because somebody knows somebody at a nonprofit and it seems like a good match. And then you get something good going. But then I think the question of how the district looks from a bird's eye view and thinks about where can we encourage a partner who's working really well with one school to expand to this other school and what's really needed. I mean, you don't want what partners feel like doing to drive what kind of learning opportunities come to our kids. You want it to be driven by what kind of enrichment would really help the students. So I'm interested in sort of an overall partnership strategy and questions about that a number of people have alluded to of sort of like, how often are we paying our partners to do things? And that's, is an important part of it. And then like, where are we getting places where partners are putting resources into the schools? And those do seem to me like two different situations. And the former is budgetary. And so just wanting to getting an overall picture on that front. And I think those are I guess my other big picture question, and I recognize it's almost unfair because we just don't know if we're there yet, and we really hope we aren't. But if we're in a situation in the fall where we can't send students back to physical buildings, I just really wonder what we're going to do about transitioning the teachers who are working with students, because I just feel like so much of the outreach that's being done by our teacher community right now to their students is based on already knowing the families and being in contact and knowing who the parents are and having their cell phone numbers. And I just think that transferring those relationships over to a new set of teachers who the students have never met in person seems extraordinarily hard, to the point that it makes me ask, like, should we, we're promoting everybody, but should we be extending everybody with their existing teachers? So I just want to flag that. I don't expect the district to have a plan yet for that situation, because I know that to Counselor Janey's point, we're really thinking about how to safely do the in-person situation still. But I guess, as you all know, I teach in college, and the colleges are very much in the kind of, hey, I think we might be starting virtual in the fall headspace right now, many of them. And I just, I hope I can't, it would be almost impossible to imagine us being there for BPS, but at the same time, I would want there to be a little bit of contingency planning there. So I think those are my main questions. Now, I'll see if there are any blue hands, closing questions or comments sparked by anything colleagues said. All right. Seeing none, I'm going to adjourn. Oh, I do see one. Okay. Counselor Mejia, go ahead.
I'm worse than Liz here, trying to get attention. Well, this is really less of a question and more of a comment. And I just wanted to say, Counselor Bach, how incredible it has been to learn about the budget and about our jobs, or at least my job and my role as a city councilor through these working sessions. So I just want to say thank you. I know it's a lot of work to get us to do this, but I learn in a lot of these working sessions because I get inspired by what my colleagues are talking about. And so I just want to say thank you for your chairmanship around the Ways and Means and how we are acclimating and being prepared to enter these public hearings in a more organized way. And I think this is the first time they've done something like this, and I'm just so glad that I get to benefit from this work. And I know it's time consuming, and I know my colleagues, especially those who are more seasoned, probably get annoyed by all these extracurricular activities and questions that I ask during these times. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for your leadership in this space and making our process as efficient as it has been. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Councilor Mejia. That's very kind.
That was so beautiful. That was really very neat to watch.
Thank you, Councilor Sabi George. Thank you all for coming. I mean, this was an idea conceived, in the winter, not sure if it would work, and then we went online, and we had to kind of change it midstream. And honestly, it wouldn't have meant anything to do these without having everybody's participation. So it's been really great to have everyone showing up and asking questions. And you say you've learned a lot, Councilor Mejia. I have learned a ton from these, and yeah, hugely appreciate the chance to think through things in advance of the hearing. And I'll also say, because we're being recorded, I want to give a shout out to the central staff who has been typing up all these questions, like a huge shout out, because we definitely added to the workload with this process. I mean, we made it more thorough on the council side, which is what we should do, because it's a major duty of this council to scrutinize the budget, but it's definitely more work. And then also I want to give a big shout out to our respective staffs who have been prepping on the budget, because we also ran a series of budget clinics for staff, and we had great participation in those. And it always makes me smile when you all have good questions that have been researched in detail based on the budget book. I know that sometimes that's our own genius, but sometimes it's the people behind us. And I just want to acknowledge that they're great. And so, there's really there's no way for one person to wrap their arms around the city's budget. It's enormous, and it has so many facets. And so it's got to be a team effort on the council front and on the staff front. So really grateful for all of that. Councilor Breeden, I see that you have a raised blue hand, and then I'll go to Councilor Janey. Councilor Breeden.
This one. Which hand? Yes, I want to thank you, Councillor Bach, as well, because as a new councillor, the budget process is enormous, and there's so much to learn. And also, I also thank my seasoned colleagues on the council for their patience with the maybe not so, what's going on with this thing, the dumb questions that I might ask from time to time about things. I also feel that every one of us brings our own particular perspective, and I think that's very rich. And we bring our life experience, our perspective. We bring it all to the table, and I really feel that's a very rich and deep conversation that we have. And I really applaud everyone's commitment to making our city work better, and especially our Boston Public Schools. I'm excited with the direction we're going. We have a huge amount of work to do. But I'm really excited to be working with you all to see if we can make things better and get better outcomes for our students across the city and their families. Because I'm a strong advocate for adult education, especially in the area of ESSA, supporting our families so they can achieve more become more economically successful in our society. So thank you all so much, and it's been a pleasure. I always enjoy these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Breeden. Council President Janey.
I just want to add to the love fest. I want to start by, again, thanking central staff But thanking, like you said, all of our council staff. I want to give a shout out to Michaela Parkin on my team for her amazing work. And then really to you, Chair Bach. I'm impressed. I don't know if we're the only ones still here, but the ones I can see were all women. And I had the opportunity I think it was just yesterday. Forgive me, my time isn't what it used to be. I can't track it the way I used to be. It was this week. So it was either yesterday or the day before. I had the opportunity to speak to a graduate class over at UMass about women and how we lead. And I talked about empathy and what we heard just here in this Love Fest, and what we demonstrate in our working sessions and certainly in our hearings is that empathy, that engagement piece, and how you've led this process, engaging us, engaging our staff. I am particularly grateful for how you have made yourself available to Michaela. She is new in this process. I'm sure Julia and Liz, your staff are new too, but she's new in this role. She's not new in my office, but she's new in this role, and you've made yourself available to her. And then the third thing that I mentioned, the third E was equity. So it was that empathy, that engagement, and that equity. And again, that is where I see this council leading. Many of the women in particular have been strong voices on the equity front. And it's been through this budget process, which is the statement of our values, and under your leadership as chair, that I have been just impressed with how we have how you have created a process that allows for more engagement and for that equity to kind of shine in, and for us as women to be able to lead. Because we have experienced these things. The people that I represent, I'm not just telling you stories from people I know. I've gone through these things myself too, and see every single day. So I'm just appreciative, and I wanted to just weigh in and say that, as president, the three of you are brand new to the council. We're equal time in terms of my presidency. And I knew how big Ways and Means would be. And, you've come in as a newbie. You have come in as a new counselor, and you've taken it to a whole nother level. And so I am deeply grateful for your leadership, and for everyone who is still on the call for this Love Fest, for how you all lead in this work. And so I just want to add to the chorus and say thank you, Chairwoman Bach, for your leadership. You've taken a tremendous, huge task, particularly given that we are doing this, you guys, all in the midst of a global pandemic. Okay, so the workload has been insane, not just for us as counselors, for all of the people behind us that make us look good and shine bright. So again, shout out to central staff and our own teams. Thank you, Kenzie.
Thank you. Thank you all.
I love you all. I don't want to leave. No, I'm just joking.
I want to snippet this little end here so we can just share it out on our pages and tag each other. Love Fest. But I mean it. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, guys.
Okay, well, now I have to add in.
Are you going to let the president have the last word?
My love for this budget process initiated when Kenzie came to work for me.
She's taking all the credit.
To focus on the budget. And no, she's taking it to a whole new level.
Yes.
Whole new level. So I love it. I love watching it. I love being a part of it. And this is good stuff. It's really good stuff. Thanks, Kenzie. But we still have like weeks left of this.
I was gonna say, yeah, no, this is
flowers or sandwiches to wrap up yet today.
We're moving along though.
Indeed. No, it's there's a lot of the budget process left to go. And I think in many ways a very hard June ahead in terms of budgets. But I think my hope is that as we sort of turn to that question of kind of where the city budget can land for next year, and as we look ahead, that this has sort of laid some foundation for us all to have been having a conversation together about the departmental budgets and about the priorities that we as a council want to influence on budgeting. So I really appreciate you all and you all coming to these things, and Councillor Sabi George for indeed calling me up back in 2016 and seeing if I would be her budget director, despite the fact we didn't know each other. And so it's been great to do the working sessions. I feel like now I should shout out by name. So for people who don't know, when we talk about central staff, on my side, on the budget world, I'm talking about Michelle Goldberg, who holds it down on the central staff side, with Shane Pack and Cora Montrond. And then Carrie, who has been running all of our budget hearings and still has many to go. And Candace, who has been doing these working sessions. And then on my team, John Spillane, who's been the point person on the budget, and has also run all those budget clinics for the staff. And Emily Brown, my policy director, who also helps out with various policy related budget things. And then of course we all know everybody else on central staff and on my staff also gets roped in. So many thanks, and it's good. This is a little embarrassing, but a good conversation to get to have before we continue with the serious work of the hearings ahead. So thank you all.
Thank you.
I'm going to adjourn this meeting, this working session of the Ways and Means Committee, and everyone have a good afternoon.
Let me take a picture. Wait, let me take a picture.
Let's do Shift Command 3. Smile.
Oh, how you do that?
You can do that? That's crazy.
Shift Command 3.
Go ahead, look at the camera, do Shift Command 3. I hope we're adjourned. We're doing this on.
We did adjourn, yeah, although it's
Okay,
definitely
hope the
still,
TV is off.
but no, it's definitely still rolling, but in theory, Candace can crop it.
Mine doesn't work.
No. Are you on an Apple?
Oh, I just did it! Oh, you taught me something new. Y'all in trouble now. I've been doing it with the phone. Thank you.
All right, thank you all, much love.
Bye, everybody.
Bye now. Thanks, Kenzie. Get out of here.